we got the match up and ready to go. Is it Ensoul? Not a matchup I think I've ever seen before. An Ensoul artifact, a card I haven't really seen be a presence in the format in any real heavy way in some time.
It's been a minute, as a matter of fact. I can tell you the last time I think I saw Izzet Ensoul on a feature match, and it might have been the Pro Tour Finals of Magic 2015. Right, it's been a minute since that card has been dominant. Okay, but it has been a part of this format in the past. And Tim is now 5-1 with an Izzet version of it here against sort of the more classic Izzet Phoenix out of Max on your left side. Now, these players have been shuffling up for a minute, so it looks like we're resolving mulligans here. Now, the Izzet Ensoul deck, of course, if we're talking about Ensoul Artifact, can turn something into a 5/5 immediately and get aggressive. So mulliganing down to 6 here. It's not necessarily a deck that thrives on having access to a ton of cards. It just needs the right cards.
Absolutely. And you mentioned kind of wanting an artifact. Well, here is one, thanks to being able to make a map token off of Spyglass Siren from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, a relatively new pickup for the deck. Able to make a map token, which will enable a turn to Ensoul if you want it. Sometimes you kind of want to wait for Darksteel Citadel, the land that gives it indestructible, especially in the case of Izzet Phoenix, where they have things like Lightning Axe. You may be a little more sensitive to that kind of thing with just a Spirebluff and a go. But there is, your Darksteel Citadel, just a crack at the map.
You named it, though. That was perfect. Now, we had Max, like many of us, had to start reading Tim's cards on turn 1, which is always an accomplishment. Achievement unlocked there for Tim, which I'll be honest, he probably unlocked that on turn 1 of round 1. But good for him. But yeah, that gives it the token. So it's kind of another option. But you mentioned it, a removal spell there coming out from Max takes down the Siren. Now, the Indestructible, now tapped Darksteel Citadel. That is the one that, if it picks up some scissors right now, could start coming in for 5, and Max is going to be hard pressed to stop that. What does Max want to try to do here, Drake, to answer what Tim does? Is it just hope that there's not a 5/5 that comes at you, or is there much as you can do to try to play around it?
Yeah, so the 5/5 is going to be a big part of the equation as far as problems go. You can answer a lot of the other stuff pretty easily, just kind of some random scraps hanging around. You see Inti, the Sensual of the Sun, a big part of like the fair plan for this Izzet Ensoul deck, like your backup kind of beat downs, get some value plan. I think Phoenix is going to be good against that. They're going to be actually pretty weak against the Darksteel Citadel Ensoul stuff specifically. But even there, you can do a little bit of a race. A lot of Izzet Phoenix threats are flyers. They can fly over any kind of indestructible blockers or large blockers, and you can kind of present a racing situation. That's gonna be the plan if you got Ensouled early, but against the just like scraps like this Voldaren Epic here, the Spyglass Siren, stuff like that, I mean, you can kind of take a little bit of a more controlling role, and your threats are just gonna be better. Your card advantage is better, your threats are better, and with no graveyard hate in game number 1 for the Ensoul deck, I think you're just gonna outclass them on most axes.
Yeah, and Max is certainly not under any pressure right now. I think that's a Voldaren Epic here from Tim. So all enablers and no payoff at this point for Tim, is no 5/5s coming in, even with the indestructible land. He has a couple mana open, but Max is getting all the freedom here to just set up his hand, find what he wants. It doesn't look like there's any Phoenixes in the yard quite yet, but I spot at least one in the hand. And look, he's at 20 life against a deck that wants to be attacking you for 5 on turn 2. So not ideal for Tim, whereas Max, you mentioned out last. It looks like he's taking sort of that slower approach, just leaving his mana open here, waiting to see what Tim does, respond to it, and at the end of all of it, plans to have a couple of Phoenixes clean up.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big part of the equation with Izzet Phoenix. You actually do make headway just moving cards around because you're filling your graveyard for Delve by just casting cantrips and stuff. And with your opponent just buying Gigantha on their turn 4, you have to be stoked to see that, because now you're under no pressure. Like you said, you're under no pressure to take any actions, which means you can really set up some impressive turns, both with Phoenixes, Temporal Trespass, if that's the thing you want. You see Max just developing mana, handful of spells. You don't want to just run all your stuff out. But even if you do things like Treasure Cruise, do a lot to recoup it. I mean, every single metric you could gauge this match on, I think Max is ahead, except, I guess creatures in play. He's really got it all under lock. We'll see what Tim can present.
Ooh. Well, if that's a metric we're going by, Max is falling miles behind.
Fortunately, that's not the metric that I think is going to convert to a victory, as Spyglass Siren and Voldaren Epic are relatively small in the grand scheme of threats.
Well, they're not that small anymore. We are well, there's still one.
No, that's a land. That's not gonna, no. You tried. I mean, we're joking, but if there is enough of this kind of thing going on, there are reckless bushwhackers in this deck. and that will be able to upgrade a lot of these little mopey things that we're kind of making fun of here a little bit. But I mean, that is a real part of the backup plan for Ensoul. The deck's called Ensoul. That's not the entire, part of the equation. And Inti is going to join the bunch. Going to get another reread of that one. Ton of text on that one.
Well, you're right. If people aren't familiar with Reckless Bushwhacker, it's sort of the classic. It used to be entire decks were named after bushwhackers because of what they do, giving creatures a pump and haste and turning all of your small guys into threats that can win the game after they've poked people down. Now, I don't know if that's what's going to happen here. There is a Phoenix that has hit the graveyard for Max, and with a Consider, it looks like to start things off here, I think we might see 3 spells and a bird or 2 coming back into play.
Yeah, I think Max mostly just waiting for a threat he actually cared about. Inti certainly representing that, not a card you want to just let go. And of course, it does threaten to start doing his thing right away. It says whenever you attack, got a quick read of that. Whenever you attack, you can discard a card. So it doesn't have to attack itself. You can attack with other creatures. And so Max wisely took care of that before even moving to the combat step. Got to discard a Phoenix. And now we can start to commit some cantrips to maybe just bring a bird back. And you're already winning the race out the gate. A Phoenix is going to outrace these 2 creatures in play in the heads up. But of course, Bushwhackers and other things like that can change that equation a little bit. And Ensoul, a threatening draw at basically any point. Shrapnel Blast gives you a ton of reach. This Ensoul deck can really kind of come out of nowhere. And I think those are the main features when you were talking about seeing the deck last like a Pro Tour finals. Those were the highlights of the deck back then. You still have those elements today.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like the little poke damage adds up pretty quick when it is followed up by a Bushwhacker and a big burn spell. Shrapnel Blast, of course, being 5 damage. Now, I don't know if that's going to matter this game because Max is at 18 life. He's having his big Phoenix turn here, although it does just result in 1 bird coming into play, which Tim is going to answer with
Torch the Tower. Great answer for it.
Yeah.
Exiles. If that one dies, it does exile it. And yeah, I think Max gonna want to use his mana to defend the bird. It is really the only clock he has going on, and this may open a spot here for Tim. Max having to fight over that Torch to the Tower thanks to the exile effect. Max does have 1 more land left over to play, so a little bit. The shields aren't down entirely.
Yeah, Torch to Tower. I think that's an Eldraine card, a fairly recent addition to the format, but absolutely huge because that exile effect, of course, means that the Phoenix, usually if it gets bolted or whatever, it dies, it goes to your graveyard. No big deal. I'll bring it back next turn, the turn after. But when it gets exiled and you don't have extra birds to work with, yeah, it matters. So Max fires off the Spell Pierce to protect it. And now 5 untapped lands for Tim, including an indestructible one, but no Ensoul, at least, just cracks in with the 2 1/1s. Knocks Max down to 15 and plays Gigantha.
Gigantha. Time to get Gigantha in the mix. I mean, honestly, Gigantha not that bad. Pretty hard for the Phoenix deck to answer. Lightning Axe, of course, is the big one, but already used one of those on Inti, which would signal to me that Max doesn't have a ton of other removal dialed up. Of course, that can change with a big cantrip turn.
Yeah, Tim, no longer on the mulligan. We'll go with that, right? So he's got the 5.
Sure, yeah. Picked up the card out of the companion zone. Did take some work, but it's in play.
Ledger Shredder for Max joining the board. So a lot more stally and less explosive than you might expect than these 2 decks are certainly capable of. Basically the polar opposite of what we saw last round. And now it looks like Max is counting out cards from the graveyard that are going to get exiled.
Yeah, this is the Temporal Trespass, and this is kind of the spot I was mentioning. If you give Phoenix a ton of time, these are the spots they're going to set up. Now he gets to play his threat and take an extra turn, which represents obviously 3 additional damage on the Phoenix heads up. But, who knows what else we can do. We can get more Phoenixes going. We can get the Ledger Shredder going and attacking. It just really, really gives you a huge burst of damage out of the Phoenix deck. And these cantrips going to help a lot with the Ledger Shredder to enable all that. We see a Treasure Cruise. This is what happens. If you let Phoenix take the control role, it's going to be able to set up spots like this where it just kills you out of nowhere too. Kind of a feature of both of these Izzet decks.
Yeah, you mentioned it about just how treading ground for Max was actually pulling ahead. And that's why, because it was just fueling that extra turn along with the threat. Now imagine if that Torch had resolved, right? If not for that clutch Spell Pierce, you're able to resolve that Temporal Trespass, but it would be a lot less imposing than it is in this circumstance where Max has got 2 flyers that are going to come in at 10. Tim is still staring down at 15 life on the other side. Even with Gigantha, this is just the absolute corner turn here for Max where he's going to try to close the door here on Tim and lower the window where he has anything to do to get back into the
Yeah, I think we're resolving our Free the Fae side of the Picklock Prankster, which gives you options of Fairy, Instant, or Sorcery. Looks like we're going to reach for Consider, Fiery Impulse, the other option. I think the big part of the equation here, what Max is actively thinking about, is he's got Tim dead in 2 turns with just the cantrips, right? This is face up. We can get another bird back. Just the 6 damage from the 2 Phoenixes does actually kill Tim. How do you keep yourself from dying from like the dreaded double Shrapnel Blast turn? You know, just play Darksteel Citadel, double Shrapnel Blast, last 3 cards, bam, you're dead. Those kind of punk outs are what Max really needs to kind of be heads up for. Do I need to make sure to have a blocker for Ledger Shredder? Or should I hedge for removal spells? That's really the equation to think about, is how do you keep yourself from dying?
That's a great point, because, you know, to us, to anyone who just popped into this game, you look in and you see, okay, well, Tim's got some 1/1s, they're tapped, and Max is just, he's going off. He's doing everything he wants, exiling stuff, taking turns, drawing cards, and you think, well, this game's just over. He's just going through the motions. But you're absolutely right. If you're Max, you switch over to thinking, well, how can I lose this game? And you brought up the ways that the Ensoul deck can just kill out of nowhere. And that's maybe why Tim hasn't picked him up yet either, despite now being, you know, at least 1 turn away from being dead. So to your point, Max wisely, it looks like, keeps back the Ledger Shredder, so you don't just say randomly take 5 from Gigantha and then get burned out from 15. If it has to chump block, it has to chump block. You'll still have lethal in the air.
Yeah, this is you're kind of deciding what you can beat. I'm not sure if there's a combination now, but at some point, you have to get in there with the birds. You need to present a lethal threat. But at the same time, like I mentioned, these Shrapnel Blasts are really the big threat and the big unknown if you are Max and you're trying to close this game out. I mean, if you get to untap with things as they stand, you win the game. So what is Tim going to do about that? We'll see. Seems to have some stuff to do, moving some mana around. But
I was going to say, on the other side here, Tim is not scooped yet, despite ostensibly being dead on board, which means, at least for now, he's thinking about a way out. Now, we don't know if he's thinking about ways to chain removal into killing the creatures, or if he's thinking about ways to actually try to put together lethal. But deep in the tank here to try to find a way out. Got access to 5 mana, an indestructible land, a couple 1/1s, one of which does fly. I believe, if that's the Siren down there, would be able to chump block.
Yeah, I haven't done the math. I don't know if there's something. I think we do see at least a copy of Shrapnel Blast. I don't know what like a copy of Gleeful Demolition plus Reckless Bushwhacker could accomplish. Yeah, it looks like we are just going to go ahead and start beating down with the Gigantha. I assume that's an attack, not a tap for mana.
I would assume so as well, yeah. Well, all right, Max, put to the choice here, you know, that he has no mana open. So if he takes 5, goes to 10, you would be dead to double Shrapnel Blast, and looks like we see a chump block playing around that. Good call.
And I think this is actually going to be great for Tim. He has a backup Smuggler's Copter, which a card we didn't really talk about when it comes to upgrades for this deck. Smuggler's Copter, pretty quiet in Pioneer, 4 copies in this deck, and does represent a blocker for Arclight Phoenix.
Yeah, with the Copter freed onto the format, it does slot very well into this deck. Not one I had considered for you, right about that. But so with the threat, just the threat of the double Shrapnel Blast being able to kill you, that forces the chump block out of Max. And now Tim trying to play sort of a normal game here against Max, where he's trying to win the combat on board.
Oh, yeah, this match definitely about what's on the board here. And I think we just blew up, I would assume, a blood token. I'd have to read Gleeful Demolition to see if you could just target your own Darksteel Citadel and just get the tokens for free. That might be what just happened. I didn't see any permanents move around. You can just target your own Darksteel, make 3 tokens, and then now you just get 3 tokens for 1 mana all the time. You get to keep your artifact. That's pretty powerful.
All right, the epic hardcast bird from Max, turn them all sideways. But hey,
beep beep.
Does Tim
now we're not dead here. We can cruise Smuggler's Copter and use the instant speed Shrapnel's Blast to stay alive.
He's got 2 blockers. Great. He's got 2 blockers with the. He could go to 3 if he wanted and keep the Shrapnel Blasts up for possibly going to the face.
Yeah,
so that's what Tim does. Falls down to 3 with a pair of blocks. The Prankster comes out for Max, has a blocker of his own, but okay, 3 to 15, Tim. You bought yourself another turn. We'll see what he can do with it.
Yeah, and look how close this game actually feels. It kind of feels like Tim didn't really do much this whole game. He just binds Gigantha, playing it, makes some mopey creatures or whatever. I mean, but the Shrapnel Blast just presents so much of a threat to die out of nowhere that just with what's on board, it feels like Tim doesn't need a lot to cross the finish line here. And I think Max pretty aware of that with how he sequenced his turns and leaving a blocker up every single turn very wisely.
Yeah, and very well played. It makes all of those turns where Max kind of felt like he was doing nothing. Just felt like he was sculpting his hand, just kind of playing with his food, but he wasn't. He was preparing for this eventuality because he did not have sort of a turbo Phoenix hand himself.
Here we go, back to Max.
So the attack comes in from Tim, does not represent lethal. He is out of flying blockers, and Max is still alive, so the birds come in. Does Tim have an answer? He does not.
Well, a close game. Like I said, the Shrapnel Blast never cast. Max ending the game at 11. Virtual 6 if the Shrapnel Blast would resolve. Closer game than it looked on paper, but it did really feel like Tim never really got anything started. Kind of waiting for Ensoul the entire game. Made some artifacts, kind of accrued some value. Never really drew any Bushwhackers or any kind of payoffs for all that. And Max gonna win game number 1. We'll see what the sideboard upgrades look like. We're gonna take a look at Tim's deck first.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. We're looking at Tim's deck here. Sort of the same thing that we see across the classic and solo archetypes. Lots of 1-drops that create tokens that are artifacts or are artifacts themselves. And there's actually a ton of options if you look through this deck. That is at least 12 1-drops, I think, that give you something to put an Ensoul artifact on. So you might be looking for that, that aggressive start here. In the sideboard, he has access to his own spell pierces. He's got some graveyard hate. What do you think his best options are here moving against the Phoenixes?
Yeah, you called out the graveyard hate. I really like the Unlicensed Hearse for a host of reasons. Obviously, it can be a big attacker. That matters a ton in this matchup where, the Izzet Phoenix deck is looking to play a tempo game, answer a few of your threats, attack you in the air, kill you that way. Unlicensed Hearse able to flip the script pretty quick, slowing you down a little bit by eating through the graveyard and then being a big threat itself. You may want some more of the Torch the Tower stuff. Typically, removing Phoenixes isn't actually that strong because they come right back. When you're exiling them, that's very different. And I think that's something that is going to be really appealing, especially when you can bargain it, upgrade it to 3 damage, and maybe pick off like a Ledger Shredder and stuff too with all of your token makers. It gets a little bit of extra utility there. And outside of that, maybe could reach for Hazards as well. Just a really sticky threat that Izzet Phoenix can't answer that will actually close the game really quickly. I don't want to over sideboard too much. You do need to keep that critical mass of artifacts and stuff like that. But cards like Inti that just get answered by a lot of 1-mana removal strike me as a little bit weaker in the sideboard games, especially for this particular fair matchup. And that's a card I could see shaving pretty heavy on and maybe shaving a little bit more and making some more dramatic changes when it comes to sideboarding for this matchup.
Yeah, I like you called out the Hearse. The Hearse doesn't just remove Phoenixes in this matchup, right? The Izzet Phoenix deck, we saw exile cards from its graveyard to cast an extra turn. We saw them exile for all those delve costs. So just eating 2 cards a turn, even if it's not the Phoenixes themselves, has value. In addition, of course, you mentioned the Hearse becoming a threat later on. So that's what we see from the Ensoul side. From the Phoenix side, I don't know the last time that they planned against going against the Ensoul deck, but what's probably the best access you think for them to fight on here?
Yeah, so again, I think this matchup's going to feel pretty similar to like the Convoke matchup, where here's a deck that has the option to go pretty wide. Like a few things go big. I mentioned the Darksteel Citadel thing actually being pretty problematic, but if the base case is going to be a lot of this Gleeful Demolition plus Reckless Bushwhacker stuff, that's why this Ensoul deck actually has a lot of strength here and is doing so well. You can kind of go big and go wide, and when you're sideboarding, you need to prepare for that. I think one of your best cards for being like going against that is Young Pyromancer, making a stream of chump blockers to be able to block big Ensouls. They don't really get through a pile of ground blockers very well, and it's also pretty good against the Reckless Bushwhacker stuff. Now, I do think Anger of the Gods is worse here. You probably still bring them in, but I do think it is worse here than it is against the Convoke style setups. So you maybe only bring in one, maybe you don't want both. I do think Young Pyromancer is the better of the bunch when it comes to that kind of effect. And then the last card I would reach for is some number of Crackling Drake. I think you do, especially with Torch the Tower being a face-up quantity. You saw that in game 1. I think Crackling Drake, both dodging the graveyard hate out of the sideboard and just being a single card big threat to win these kinds of races that you're going to face in this matchup, is a big deal. Ensoul, not great at blocking big flyers, And Crackling Drake is that dodges a lot of the sideboard hate and removal that you've already seen.
Well, yeah, it completely can go around the hearse, because even if the hearse nukes your entire graveyard, the Drake comes down, doesn't care about that. It cares about your graveyard as well as your cards in exile. So the Drake can be a huge game-ending threat, even if they have their graveyard hate. So that's what we're looking at. We are jumping in. Tim leading off with
Empty.
Empty on turn 2. So it stays in the deck. That looks like a Darksteel Citadel there. So has some pieces, but no 1-drop in this one. Max looks like probably just going to opt for the consider.
Oh, there you go. Close enough.
I might be considering the words work. I don't know. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Picklock Prankster is the art. I mean, no 1-mana removal spell. That's great for Tim. I mean, Inti, if you just want to overload on like individually powerful threats, maybe shave a little bit of the 1-drops, whatever Tim actually did, does demand an answer. I mean, if you don't answer Inti quick, it does its Dark Confidant impression, starts running away with the game, but Max does have the Fiery Impulse. So that
might have expected it to die on the incept there. Max goes for the consider on the incept instead, but still does have the removal spell. Passes back to Tim. Now, Tim, I imagine, did not expect to actually untap on turn 3 with the Inti. You throw it out there, you see if it works, and if it doesn't, you move on with the rest of your game plan, which appears to be a 1-drop that makes a blood token.
Yeah, and I think this sequence speaks to not planning to Ensoul this turn. Had the option to potentially Ensoul and then attack right away with the Citadel. If that's something we want to do, assuming we still want to Ensoul in the sideboard games. Gleeful Demolition going to happen instead. Interesting.
Well, yeah, and going back to the sideboard we talked about, right? We mentioned that if you bring in Anger the Gods, right? Anger the Gods looks pretty good against Tim's board right now. But if instead Tim had gone for the Ensoul on the indestructible land, then your Anger the Gods looks terrible. And that's sort of the two sides of the deck that can make the Ensoul deck a little tricky to deal with and allow it to kind of steal those games out of nowhere, especially when people maybe aren't familiar with it and aren't used to getting bushwhackered out of the Izzet deck.
Yeah, I think when you think about Izzet Ensoul, Ensoul's the name of the deck. You're thinking about that big 5/5, but being able to reach for the Gleeful Demolitions and the Bushwhackers are a really nice pivot for this deck. Able to kind of have individually powerful cards like Smuggler's Copter and Empty, as well as the ability to go wide and go tall, forces your opponent to just draw the right half of their deck. Like right now, you're seeing, like you mentioned, the go wide plan here. A bunch of Goblin tokens, Lenard Epicure, a lot of bodies. Izzet Phoenix pretty bad at answering that. Anger, the good card here. If it was Ensoul instead, you wouldn't want Anger at all. Now you want a completely different set of cards. And that pressure is what gives this Ensoul deck a lot of additional power. And here's the blood token being sacrificed so that, your objects just matter too.
Yeah, it's worked out well for Tim. Max is, we've burned some costs. We've killed some extra, we've drawn some extra cards. We've killed some creatures, but still kind of behind on board right now. And it could get really ugly if Tim has, sort of that kicker effect, whatever it may be. It looks like, though, it's an Inti, which Max is going to have to answer again. Which, he should be able
another
to
one
rip
answer.
Cards.
Has it. Phoenix in as well. First trouble.
That's a great one right there. I think for Max, the Lightning Axe pitching a Phoenix into the graveyard, allowing him to advance his Phoenix plan while also advancing his plan of staying alive by not dying to grizzly bears. So.
Well, yeah, not dying and not giving Tim the ability to just get a bunch of additional value. I mean, Inti is a strong card. That's been proven time and time again. As here comes another Gleeful Demolition and further the go wide plan. Yeah, I mean, you want to keep it to one axis. Now, if Max draws Anger the Gods, he's very ahead to maybe just wins the game on the spot. If Inti's part of the equation and Tim's getting card advantage as well, that's another axis you need to catch up on entirely. And that could maybe be too much for Max to handle. So wisely picking that one off.
So uses the adventure half of the fairy there, instantly picks the removal spell up, but that removal spell was not an Anger of the Gods. It looked like it was point removal. Here we go. This is how he's going to try to play this game. Young Pyromancer into Treasure Cruise to make some tokens, and it is a Pioneer, a format of 1/1s crashing into each other right now. That's what this game looks like it's going to be decided on, but this is opening the door wide open for Tim here if he has a finisher.
In Magic, sometimes you label decks as a token strategy. I don't know how many tokens you have to make in order to be labeled a token strategy. I would maybe make an argument Tim's deck with the goblins, maps, bloods, and all that stuff could have an alternative name. that involves the tokens.
No kidding.
You know, label, but certainly a big fixture of the game that we see in front of us here today. As an island played, has an opt in hand, choosing to wait on it. Can't bring a bird back with it, so might as well wait and have the most information when casting that. Max and Izzet Master. Twinless twin.
Okay, so this is the window for Tim. What does he lead with? Finally,
Ensoul!
Deep into game two. Deep into game two. The scissors show up. They enchant.
And they're good.
Darksteel Citadel. Well, this is all the accesses now, right? This is the 1/1 Swarm and the Indestructible 5/5.
Right, and now this is a real problem for Max, like you just mentioned. And now we're taking a look at the opt. Couldn't find a spell pierce, so no reason to do it in response or anything. But now we need to start talking about winning the race, keeping your Pyromancer alive. But when you're planning to trade away tokens in order to start to cut down the go wide plan, now you have to start committing one to the Abyss, aka Darksteel Citadel with Scissors, which is going to come in every turn, and that might split the young Pyromancer's tokens a little too wide. As you see Max really thinking about, you know, how he wants to sequence this. A second Pyromancer dialed up in hand, maybe that can start to fight through. But you know, like you said, every single
if he can stall, right? If he can hang around in there, Pyromancer has the ability to match those tokens, even throwing away one every turn. But another gleeful demolition.
Another gleeful demolition.
That one might
you see Max chuckling there. Tim's like, "Why won't you die? More goblins, bring them out."
All right, is it tokens confirmed? I'll say.
Okay, yeah, we're right on that. We're there. One. You're on board. Let's do it. Is it tokens?
Max wanted to play Is it tokens, but it doesn't look like he's going to be able to keep up with this little token war here.
His token maker's strong. Looking to be worse right now. We'll see. You know, like I said, Anger the Gods, not that great. Picks up your own Pyromancers, and deploying a second one, I would certainly say indicates no anger. You're fighting this heads up with some young Pyromancers, and we'll see who that favors. With Max really low in life, though, a Shrapnel Blast at basically any point for the rest of the game
That's right.
Is going to be a pretty big problem for Max to cover as well. And there's going to be a lot of draw steps left in this game, assuming Max is going to be able to fight his way back in.
Yeah, so it's a million tokens, but Max is going to be able to make a million tokens as well, right? He's got 3 mana open along with the Pyromancers. So let's see. Tim is casting. I can't tell what. Oh, that's Hazoret, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a Hazoret, and that's another big indestructible 5-power attacker. This is, I mean, so much pressure. Yeah, Max is going to have to start getting some removal spells involved, or we might just be dead right now. And Fiery Impulse is going to start picking through these tokens. Need to generate tokens of his own in order to generate enough blockers. But Hazoret adds the extra element of Tim can just pitch his card every turn and just deal 2 damage. A little Sulfuric Vortex style effect.
And I think it might come up because Max able to fire off 2 removal spells there, take out 2 of Tim's tokens while generating 4 of his own. I think when the dust clears on this attack step, you're going to see a board that at least shows a path to victory for Max. And Tim is going to be leaning on that Hazoret and any Shrapnel Blasts he might draw. But we'll see how far Max falls down here. It might be too much.
Looks like to 3. And 3, I mean, isn't dead to Hazard, but with you only having your own Pyromancers in play, maybe they have to start getting involved in the blocking. And with Max's hand, I think I saw Island Spell Pierce. That is not the mixture that's going to win you this game. If you're Max, big draw step here. You see him rubbing on the table there. It's got to be a good one.
Okay, well, that is pretty much what he wanted. It's going to cantrip into another spell, make 2 blockers. And I mean, look like that. Just like that, Tim has 5 attackers. Max has 4 blockers without finding another spell. If he's able to chain through a couple here, he'll get back the Phoenix even. And really set up
another Phoenix off Consider and drew a Sleight of Hand. So this is coming up Max right now. Another big hit, and we might actually have a chance in this game, getting some birds. I mean, I don't know if we can assemble a lethal attack.
Well, if he's able to just survive, it takes Hazoret 2 turns, right? Because Tim doesn't have any cards in hand. Or the mana to double activate. As long as Max can survive, the next Hazoret activation puts him to 1. You might even have an attack to line up next turn.
How about Spell Pierce your own Sleight of Hand to make tokens and for your 3rd spell, and then you get to pay to still get the card.
How about that?
Yeah. Getting tricksy is Max. I love this play a lot. Guarantee that 3rd spell. I used to play a little bit of Phoenix on Arena, and the cards were bad enough that there were times where you end up lightning axing your own stuff just to like you lightning axe your own bird, discarding a bird, get the bird back as your third spell. I love these kinds of plays where you have to like use your spells against yourself just to get the required spell count.
What a line from Max, man. You nailed it. And being able to pay for it at the end of it too.
I still get my card. I think he's putting an anger on bottom there. I think that certainly speaks to the direction this game has gone.
Wow. So that is an incredible play there for Max, an incredible line he was able to find. He's staring down 9 tokens that were made off Gleeful Demolitions. And not only is the game not over, he's starting to get a little aggressive here. Tim is probably going to have to find something on top of his deck, or Max might be able to turn this one around.
Yeah, what a match out of the clear yet is Max, but an attack for 10. I mean, that's half of Tim's life total in one hit. The Pyromancers you're not planning to block with, so you're going to go ahead and get those involved in combat along with the Phoenixes that can't be blocked. But if Tim leaves everything back to block and just pitches to Hazoret, it's not clear that Max has enough right now to get through the string of blockers. A Shrapnel Blast means game over right now. There's no mana up for Max at all. So Shrapnel Blast to kill, and Tim might still have it in the heads up if he just leaves back all the blockers. I imagine you're going to do some amount of attacking with things like Hazoret that are just 5/5s anyway. But,
Yeah, that's a great point, is that Max is that's a huge turn for Max to get back into this game. It continues. Now things switch back around to Tim, and you just elaborated on how he can actually find a way back in this game despite staring down multiple Phoenixes now and multiple young Pyromancers. His outs and his ways to get there aren't easy, and it's going to be very stressful passing the turn back to Max here. But Tim does have a line to victory. We'll see if Max is able on the turn of the game here. I mean, this is it. Can he find a way to punch through for 10 damage?
Yeah, I mean, that's very much about Max needs to win right here. Now, something like Temporal Trespass would easily lock the game up. So definitely some cards to draw or cantrip into just to win right now. But with what we see on the board, like even just land, activate Hall, or anything like that, there's no sequence of just attacking, I think, that wins Max the game. You just pitch with Hazoret on instep into untap, draw, pitch again. That's 4. You're at 3. You're dead. So you have to find some sequence that gets through right now. And any further tokens are summoning sick. So the attackers you see right now are all we got. 6 is getting through in the air for sure. So we don't need that much more, but we do need more.
I can't look at that one. What that is.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that artwork, but with 4 dice on it, I think it's Thing in the Ice, the promo. Little late to the party, but could be a huge pickup.
Okay, so it begins then. Thing in the Ice, play Sleight of Hand. That's 1 spell down. That's 1 counter off. Max has 3 mana open. Find some cantrips here. Or shout out to Twitch chat here. Frank Carson, Hall of Famer, hanging out in Twitch chat, saying that Temporal Trespass also a reasonable way to get out of this one.
Yeah,
first things first. Send everything in for Max.
Yeah, send everybody. I mean, this speaks to Temporal Trespass or the ability to flip or anger. Something like that. Some combination that involves you not dying is making this attack. I mean, maybe it could just be needing Tim to mess up, but I think he can live through what we have here.
Yeah,
but like I said, a ton that can change that. Temporal Trespass, the biggest one.
Yeah. Let's
get a quick look at how many copies are in Max's deck. I think it's just the one. It is just the one. None on the sideboard.
It's a perfect one of when you draw it, usually. How about
that? You can cantrip to find it. The one ofs are a lot stronger in your deck of 12, 16 cantrips or whatever. And there is the instep pitch. It looks like Tim did survive the hit.
Okay, what do we got here? Prismari Command.
The last 2? Wow. Yeah, that's going to do it.
Wow. What a finish. What a finish by Max. Pulling that one out there. That was 9 tokens Tim made off of Gleeful Demolition, swinging with everything. Max using an incredible line when it looked like he is dead. He's able to spell pierce his own spells to get those Phoenixes back, find the line, get there with a Prismari Command with the end at 1 life. It doesn't get any closer than that. What a match.
Yeah, and this is what I love about watching good players in action. Both of these players, at 5-1, there's some of the cream of the crop with this tournament and their preparation. And Max, in game number 2, it's really easy to be in that seat and start to get discouraged, especially when you see that third Gleeful Demolition. We remember Max is like cackling at it. It's like so many tokens, so much to fight through. But really keeping his head in the game, really establishing the plan. And those young Pyromancers, we called them out in the sideboarding, they looked incredible. We're able to keep up with that token production. And even though Max, was dead to a few things, dead to Shrapnel Blast and a few things like that, was able to get lucky on that axis and played great with the Spell Pierce, giving you that guaranteed third spell, and was able to lock it up, just keeping his head in the game, not getting discouraged by the pile of stuff that I've seen other players do that. I think that's a really incredible performance from Max and really showing his expertise with this Izzet Phoenix deck.
Yeah, absolutely. So we look, I'm excited. We have to talk to Max after that one. We are going to try to head down to the booth here, get an interview. I imagine we'll let Max catch his breath first. That was quite
that's a sweet one to win. I mean, we mentioned too, like, Tim had it going on all axes, except maybe card advantage. I mean, he had the go big in 2 different creatures. He had it in the Ensouled, Darksoul Citadel, and the Hazoret, which just puts so much pressure as far as size goes. And then the 9 tokens as well. And we mentioned the only card in the Izzet Phoenix deck that can really keep up with that was Young Pyromancer. Max drew both, was still under the gun thanks to the activation from Hazoret. And, like I said, we saw he was able to pull it out, but those games are really hard to win. If you run that one back, whatever, a million times, I'd be shocked how many times Max can win from that spot. But, like I said, kept his head in it, played great, sequences cards great. And we saw his hand was garbage, drew that Consider off the top. And he's like, okay, Consider, Graveyard of Phoenix, that's big. Draws Sleight of Hand, that's big. Both of those things need to happen for him to even survive. And it sure did.
And then had to find the Prismari Command. So
yeah, he needed to get lucky again.
It goes back to that first game, right, where he's playing all of those cards and just cantripping through his deck, and he's got all these things you can see running through his mind. Whereas you're watching like this, hey, this is over. But you will never have that game we just saw where he pulls it out of a spot that almost anyone looks dead. He was laughing. There's 9 tokens. Yeah, you got me. It's 9 tokens. I'm never going to beat that. No one beats that, right? Well, if sometimes you give yourself the opportunity to draw your outs, occasionally you're going to draw your outs and you're going to look amazing doing it. So that was a great game. All right, let's head down to the interview, Drake. I'll let you take it away here with Max. That was a great game.
Max, congratulations! What a game and a match to play.
Yeah, that was a crazy game. It was. I wasn't even looking for the Prismari Command, honestly. My thought was attack for a lot, chain 4 spells, and then the Prismari Command just showed up. It's a one of, but that's why they're in there, I guess.
Perfect. Just right when you needed it. Yeah, I mean, right we were talking about Temporal Trespass as your only out. Prismari Command obviously did an awesome job there. I want to go back to the beginning of the match. So you're someone that when I think about Izzet decks in Magic right now, your name is nearly synonymous. Twinless Twin, you play Izzet all the time. You're here with your Izzet Phoenix deck. You're 6-1, you're crushing. What do you know about the Izzet Ensoul deck? Is this a deck you had prepared for? I mean, it's an Izzet deck. Is it something you tried, something you were aware of? Do you have familiarity in this matchup?
No, I really didn't, and it definitely caught me off guard. Even from the opening hand, I thought Gigantha could mean Niv, just because I felt like a lot of the fair Gigantha mid-range decks had kind of been pushed out of the meta by Phoenix. So I wasn't sure whether to keep my Lightning Axe Torch the Tower hand, but then once I saw that, I've played against Izzet Ensoul and with Izzet Ensoul, but it was like 2 or 3 years ago. So it was definitely a while ago, and I made a weird block game 1 with the Ledger Shredder because I had another Phoenix in hand, and my thought was I'm only dying to double Shrapnel Blast here. So, but I'm not sure if that was correct, but I really had no clue what was in my opponent's deck is the point. So I was just I was trying to guess as best I could.
Yeah, that was something we certainly called out a little bit is like, yeah, I mean, Max really only dies to a string of Shrapnel Blasts here. It looks like you sniffed that out and played around it. Really heads up. I mean, I think you had one in hand at the end of the game. I'd have to go back and watch, but certainly I think the sequence you needed to play around, and that was how you lost that game. That's part of where that deck gets its power. And weird block to some. Really heads up by you, and I think showing a little bit of expertise. You mentioned you'd played with the Ensoul deck before, although maybe not with the host of upgrades it had. But in game number 2, I mean, some masterful navigation. I want to talk about a little bit into that game when you see the third Gleeful Demolition, this pile of tokens, and Soul comes out. I mean, we caught a laugh, I think, on the third Gleeful Demolition. I mean, talk to me about where your head's at as soon as you see that. What are you thinking? You're like, I'm not winning this, or you're like, dang, I need to get lucky? Where's your head at?
So I had Anger of the Gods in my deck post board. So my first thought after the second Demolition was I could Anger, but instead I found a Pyromancer and a second Pyromancer on consecutive draws. So I have to pivot to this Pyromancer plan. That's what my deck's giving me, and I kind of didn't think I was going to be able to win, but I did know I had the 2 Phoenixes, and I boarded out Trespass, which made it a lot harder. I felt like I was more trying to interact rather than combo with Trespass. So I was like, I need to make a ton of tokens and then bring back multiple Phoenixes, and that's how I can race. And then the Hazoret, I really thought it was over because I was like, okay, they just discard 2 cards. I can't do anything. I had 1 Borrower, but I bottomed it earlier in the game, and I can't shuffle my deck, so it's just like no outs. But the Prismari Command surprised me as much as it surprised you guys.
We were surprised. I didn't even know Trespass was out of your deck. We were sitting there like, Trespass is the big one, maybe a bunch of other birds. Like going into that final turn, we were like, I don't know, he needs a lot. He's very dead in the heads up, not dead to the attack at all. Even the Hall doesn't change that. Yeah, that Prismari Command was clutch right when you needed it.
It was super clutch, yeah. And I thought about, should I Thing in the Ice first, or should I just Sleight of Hand in case I hit a Phoenix? Yeah. But I had actually boarded out a Phoenix, which, again, I don't know if it's correct, but I don't know what's in their deck.
Sure.
And I boarded in some slower cards, so I thought board out a Phoenix. And so I was like, I have 1 Phoenix. I'll just try to flip this Thing in the Ice, and then boom, Prismari Command. I take the Prismari Command because the other card's a land. And then I attack with everything without counting how much damage I was dealing, because I was like, I'm either killing them with this Prismari Command or I'm dying. So it was a fun ending to the match for me.
Oh yeah, an incredible match it was. One more question I have about kind of your thoughts on Izzet Phoenix, especially in the Pioneer format. I mean, obviously Pro Tour on the horizon. Yep. If Phoenix is a deck we're seeing a big uptick in, and that is actually surprising to me. I mean, I love it. I love watching it. But when you talk about the shape of the format right now with cards like Torch of the Tower, exiling Phoenixes, cards like No More Lies, able to exile them on the stack, a big pickup for the blue-white in the matchup, I assume. What are your thoughts on the standing? These cards don't matter. Your other cards got stronger. How do you feel about Izzet in Pioneer as a whole with Murders at Karlov Manor in the format?
Yeah, I think that there are these new cards. There's the No Lies card, and blue-white is already a pretty tricky matchup to play with Phoenix. I think it's pretty 50-50, but lots of maneuvering. I think the biggest thing for Phoenix is just when it got Sleight of Hand, it became so consistent. And previously when I had played Phoenix, I tried playing it in the past for RC Dallas last season. But when you only have 8 cantrips, there's still a fail rate of how clunky your deck can be. So when you have those cantrips, I mean, Phoenix just feels really strong. I'm not super worried about any of the new cards from Murders, even if they do make some decks stronger. I think that as long as they're not making the bad matchups better, I guess. So like if there was a card that made, well, an Archdruid's Charm, actually, maybe if Lotus ends up being good, that's bad news for Phoenix because that's a tricky matchup. But I'm less worried about the mana leak. We'll have to see if I play against blue-white, but I think that the matchup will be pretty similar.
Well, you're 5-1 right now in this tournament. You're setting up well moving forward. So, or rather, I'm sorry. This is you're 6-1 now. Is that true?
I believe I'm 6-1. Yep.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, I was looking at the last round. So you're 6-1. You feel you're looking ahead to the top 8, depending the last round. Look, how are you feeling right now? Looking at the rest of the day and where you're at, how you've been playing, because you're coming off an amazing match where you showed some real mastery of the deck. That is the perfect answer.
I'm hungry. I need this pizza. I'm hoping I can draw into top 8 to eat the rest of my pizza.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'll take down the top 8. Phoenix has felt great. I love blue-red, so let's do it.
All right, Max. Thank you. Enjoy the pizza. Fill up. Get some fuel in you for the top 8. Hopefully, we'll see you in a bit.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Good luck, Max. Awesome performance. Well, that's there you have it. The secret to success in Izzet, play around Shrapnel Blast and eat your pizza. We are gonna go ahead and come back to the booth. I believe we do not have a backup for this round. I believe so. Yeah, that'll be it for round number 7. Again, this is the penultimate round. We have one more round of Swiss. Then we're going to play through the top 8. I believe all of that is going to happen today. So we're going to cut to a break and we'll run some ads real quick, and then we'll be back with the last round of Swiss before the top 8. I'm Drake Sasser here with Corbin Hustler, and this was round number 7. Don't go anywhere.